Today is Sabbath as a palace in time. A palace in time. So what that means is that we're talking about the Sabbath as being a place for us to dwell. Last week we talked about the Sabbath as being a community event, that by having the community observe the Sabbath, that was something that they did in common, which was different from those who lived surrounding them from other cultures. And because they did it in common, that gave them a unifying theme. They always knew who their brothers and sisters were because they were together in this particular activity. Others would see them as being a community, a group, because of that one activity. So today we're talking about the Sabbath as a place to dwell. That we want to talk about the characteristics of it in terms of how we are affected by it and how we also have traditions and activities that we do. But in some ways, it's as though we go to this place mentally, spiritually. We go to this place where we observe Sabbath. Our purpose statement is to relax into the peace of Sabbath. This palace in time, this palace is our place in which we will dwell during this time of rest. I would like to share with you the prayer that I have from the author, because it summarizes what we're going to accomplish today. And so please pray with me. God, in our more lucid moments, we know we depend on you for all that we have and all that we are. You provide us work by which we obtain our daily bread. You bless us with families and friends. You offer us skills and guide our steps and tend our hurts and teach us truth. You even hold our hand as we make tough choices and transition through the tough places in life. We lack nothing that we need. Thank you, Lord. Amen. And we lack nothing that we need is the theme of what we're going to talk about today. So why the Sabbath? You remember last week why we said we had the Sabbath? To rest, that on the seventh day of creation, even God rested. God rested that day. The work was finished. He was happy. The creation was complete, and he rested. And we said that if God rests, then certainly we need also to rest. And there's a section on practices of Christians. It's called self-care. Do you do a better job at self-care than you used to? Self-care, that's a big area of our lives. When you lack self-care, we know that you shorten your lifespan. So what does self-care do for you? We can talk about it in four aspects. There is the spiritual self-care. What does self-care spiritually mean? And how does it help you? Spiritual self-care.
Reading the Bible.
Reading the Bible.
Spending time in prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Attending church.
Mm-hmm. And so those are activities that are included in spiritual self-care. But what does it do for us? It fulfills for us and reinforces for us our God-like existence, our God-like creation in his image. And it reconnects us very significantly when we attend to our spiritual life. We all know that we know the importance of a spiritual life because we live it. It's not as though we only practice it one day a week. It is something that we have built our lives around, the practices of spiritual care. Now, another one is mental health. Mental health, what can we say about that one? Let me find, here we go. Mental health. Things that you can do that hurt your mental health are things like holding grudges and not forgiving. If you refuse to forgive someone and hold a grudge, how does that affect you? You're angry. And when you're angry, what happens to your blood pressure? It literally has symptoms that affect you physically, doesn't it? So, negative thoughts, holding grudges, anger causes our bodies to come from a time of harmonious equilibrium to one of heightened anxiety. And so that by doing practices that hurt your mental health or your mental well-being, you're also hurting the rest of you. People who are constantly angry very often have lots of illnesses and manifestations of that. If you're constantly angry and you're tense, your muscles hurt more, your joints hurt more, your blood pressure goes up, and it's like everything starts to go out of whack. So we know that taking care of our mental health is one part of taking care of our entire physical being. So don't let anger fester. What is it? You get married, never go to sleep angry, right? Make up before you go to sleep for the night because it causes you to relax and to get better rest. So mentally, we know that there are activities that can cause us, it flows over into our spiritual bad health, flows over into our physical bad health if we have consistent mental stress. So mental well-being, physical well-being, spiritual well-being, physical well-being. What happens if you don't take care for your physical well-being? How do you care for your physical well-being? Exercise and eat right. We all know that. I mean, we've been taught that from the time that we were little. You know, you can't always consistently sit and expect to stay healthy. So we know that the physical part also is important for our overall self-care. We have a wonderful body that God created for us. And in this wonderful body, it can heal itself. How often has your body healed itself? Oh my, numerous times, hasn't it? Whatever the assault was on that body, if it was a virus or a bacteria or an accident, a broken bone, all of those things can heal themselves. And that's one of the biggest parts, I think. How many of you don't take any pills in the day? We all do. Even if it's vitamins, we all take these drugs, do activities that are going to cause our physical being to be as strong as we can. So we've got mental health, spiritual health, physical health. The fourth one, emotional health. Emotional health. What are the signs of good emotional health? Happiness, that's right. Peace in your soul. And all of those, we know that there are times that it's easier to feel like that and times that are harder. Everybody talks about COVID. How did COVID hurt us? Did it hurt us spiritually? Church is closed. Did it hurt us mentally? Isolation? Did it hurt us physically? People died. People got sick. How about emotionally? We were stressed out and fearful. Separated. All of those things worked against us. And often they weren't things that we could individually change. If there was a mask mandate and you didn't do it, then you had peer pressure too. Emotional system, that's right. So emotionally, God wants for us to not be afraid. Have you ever said that? Do not be afraid? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He said for us, do not be afraid. He said for us, be joyful. He said for us, take care of one another. Do you feel better when you can help someone else? Yes. And so tending to our emotional side allows us then to gift others in different areas of self-care. So self-care is a wonderful thing because it defines for us overall how we can be satisfied, how we can be complete in the Lord. Now, if you were going to live in a space where you were happy and joyful, what would it look like? And again, yeah. What would it look like? What would the weather be? Sunny and warm, would you say? Sunny? So the weather would be sunny. What would the temperature be? 70? 70, yeah. What would the environment be? Flowers, trees, nature, babbling brook, a horse, animals. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it would be, the climate would be sunny and comfortable. It would be lush with nature. I don't think you'd put yourself in a desert, would you? No. Lush, lots of nature with animals and plants and water. Mm-hmm. How crowded would it be? Not very crowded. And when you walked and turned around over there, would there be a table with food whenever you wanted? Of the type that you want? Okay, is that pretty much what you would call heaven? Yeah. You'd want some friends around to talk to? Mm-hmm. Yep. But would you consider that pretty much to be a paradise? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so is paradise on earth? we can get close sometimes. In that paradise on earth, what are you personally doing? Are you working? A little? Are you doing favors? Relaxing? Taking care of others? So you're not laboring. You are active, but you're not laboring. Do you know what we've done is we have just described the 23rd Psalm. The 23rd Psalm. We did. And in this little exercise that we've done, we have told what those things are that take us close to God, close emotionally, spiritually, physically, and mentally, in a safe place where we have everything that we need. Do we actually live there? Now, we can't control the climate every day, but is that where you live? Is that your life? Do you have everything that you need? Do you have that emotional, spiritual, physical, mental well-being? And if you do, today you live in paradise. You don't need a lot of other things. Now, to prove this, I've given out different copies of the 23rd Psalm. And Arlene, where does yours come from? The very top line? Arlene has the Amplified Bible. Karen, will you read the one that we have in our lesson book is called the Common English Bible. Kathy, you have New Living Translation, International Standard, and King James Version. Okay? Well, we're going to do one verse at a time. Okay? And so what we want to do is we want to take that verse and look at it in terms of how it affects our well-being in all those areas we've just talked about. So, is this on? We're going to start with Steve. What I want you to do is read yours, pass it down to Kathy, who will pass it to Debbie, who will pass it to Arlene, and I will go over and hand it to, and we'll just make a cycle here. Read verse 1 only. Yep.
The Lord is my shepherd. Shall not want.
Pass it to Kathy. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. No, well, okay.
The Lord is my shepherd, I have all that I need. The Lord is the one who is shepherd, and I lack nothing. The Lord is my shepherd, to feed, to guide, and to shield me. I shall not want.
Okay. Karen.
The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing.
Now, you heard that in 5 different translations. Did anything stand out? I shall not want. Defined wanting as being, yours, Deb, I think had the most, didn't it? I lack nothing. Okay? So, having no want, the Lord is my shepherd. What does the shepherd do? I know. The shepherd. The shepherd cares for the sheep. How does he care for the sheep? What if the shepherd is a good shepherd? Will they lack anything? Will they be afraid? Will they know the shepherd's voice? Will they have food to eat, water to drink? Be protected. And that takes care of what they need physically. And also in the other spectra, you have no want. You have everything you need. Well, let's do verse 2.
He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters.
He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams.
He causes me to lie down in pastures of green grass. He guides me beside quiet waters.
He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still and quiet waters.
He lets me rest in grassy meadows. He leads me to restful waters.
Okay, so what we have here, what are some common things in all of these translations? Ample food. So what's the climate like where David lives? Is it grassy like the meadows we have outside? Is it all grassy? Aren't there desert areas also? No, it doesn't. But in the Holy Land, is it a big field of green grass? No. It's desert, more desert-like. It's much drier. And so in this verse, the shepherd knows where to take them to find the grass, to find the lush green grass. They don't go by themselves. In all of these, doesn't say he leads them. He leads them to the good grazing places. He provides for them. Water, still water. Is water always nice and comforting? No. Water causes floods, tsunamis. Water can be very fierce. It can break ships apart.
Waterfall can wear off rock.
That's right.
I mean, wow.
But the shepherd doesn't lead them to the waterfall or to the flood. Where does he lead them? To the still waters. Now, if I boat, I want to boat on still waters. I don't want to boat on ripples, or, and certainly not big things. I'm not a surfer. I don't have a surfer's heart for the risk and the anxiety of that and the fear of the force. I want ample supplies and still waters. Now, do we have any evidence of Jesus being able to supply food and water? He calmed the sea when the disciples were in the boat and the storm was raging. He calmed the sea. Multiplied the fishes and the bread. God provided manna in the wilderness and water from the rock. So we have all of this evidence that David had in the second verse here, that the good shepherd supplies. The good shepherd cares for them. And in this case, it's a lot of physical kinds of things, the physical needs. Okay, you ready to go? Let's do the next verse.
He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name.
He revives my life. He leads me in pathways that are righteous for the sake of his name.
He refreshes and restores my soul, my life. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
He keeps me alive. He guides me in proper paths for the sake of his good name.
Okay. What do we have here? What kind of need is he filling?
Guidance.
Guidance, and is that spiritual? Is there any well-being or any mental here? A little bit mental, physical? Guide you in right paths. Have you ever had the, we have decisions all the time, but how many times have you been standing at the crossroads and you don't know which way to go? Now, especially as a teenager, you're standing at the crossroads. Should you go to that group or this group or that group? Who should you make your friends? Does God help in making some of those decisions? Influence, yes. Mm-hmm. So he leads me in the path of righteousness for his good name. Because God is holy. How many times have we said that? Because God is holy. We, you, I are holy. So he leads us in a path which is parallel to the holiness of God. Leaders, who are the leaders that might be doing this? Was David a spiritual leader? Arlene's just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, he did so many bad things. Oh, names today?
I can't think of too many people that are leading us in the path of righteousness.
In the big world, you got to look pretty hard, don't you? Because very often in that big world, people are not making decisions to be Christ-like. Instead, they're pursuing power, fame, money. And we know that. We look at these people, Election Day's Tuesday. We look at these people and we say, what do I know about them? In what way have they helped to lead me in right paths? In what way do I see them as a mentor, a good leader? We look for those things and we agree that it's hard to find them very often. Because any little flaws are magnified by rumors, media, TV, radio, newspapers. What is it that they do? They look for dirt. Now, can you imagine what the newspaper would have said in David's time?
Well, we hear dirt from all over the world now.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, it's not just our local area or town or whatever, but I mean, it's from all over, and you hear all the stuff.
We do. It is very difficult to listen to any news broadcast that does not include negative things that are happening in the world. Either it can be a person's negativity or it can be environmental. COVID has been blamed for everything from economic collapses to separation of the treaties all over the world. It's COVID, it's COVID. COVID has been blamed for a decrease in the mental health of our students in their, in the school ages.
Probably blame COVID for all the shootings and stuff that happened throughout the U.S. wherever.
Increase in violence. Yeah. And so we look at, big evil, COVID. People. People did all these things. With violence, we could eliminate guns. The guns kill people. People kill people. And so we blame things. We blame diseases. We blame the surplus of violent instruments. We blame people's greed. We blame the weather because the corn crop was poor. We blame whatever. We blame the increase of rodents in Yellowstone because of a decrease in the wolf population. That's what we do. We look for ways to divert blame so that, it's all around. Jeff will let you. Jeff is saying, and look how it makes you feel. How does it make you feel, Jeff?
You have the news media and everyone else talking about all the negative things, and you absorb it. You feel hopeless.
And hopeless is bad for
Your health.
your physical health, mental health.
Emotional, makes you angry. Makes
That's
you
right.
Despondent.
Divides us.
Yeah.
It does divide us, doesn't it? So, that is not what the Good Shepherd will do. The Good Shepherd does what? Lead you to plentiful food and still waters to drink. I'm sure they're clean and plastic free. Okay, we up to verse number 4?
Starting off here for you.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me.
Even when I walk through a valley of deep darkness, I will not be afraid, because you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
Even though I walk through the sunless valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod to protect and your staff to guide, they comfort and console me.
Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no danger because you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they protect me.
Okay. Did the Good Shepherd ever prevent them from walking through the valley of the shadow of evil? Now, how could a Good Shepherd not? I mean, if he's leading you to lush green and still waters, why would the Good Shepherd walk you through the valley of evil?
It's inevitable. It's going to happen throughout time.
Mike says it's inevitable. The valley might be people who persecute us.
And we have to walk through those dark times, and it's not our fault necessarily.
So if you walk through the valley, it doesn't mean that you chose the wrong path. Now the valley of evil, the sunless valley, the dark valley. What might that symbolize? What can be your dark valley? Illness, death of a family member, financial issues, mending something that's broken, relationships, or even something you hold in your hand. We all get our time in the dark valley, don't we?
Yeah, just having to deal with the negativity that we were just talking about.
The negativity of news and world events and catastrophes, or dark valleys. But what do we know about the dark valley? God will be with us, and what will He actually do? Lead us through, protect us, shine some light in that valley, give us comfort. Help us not be overwhelmed or angry for being in that position. Emotional support, physical support of healing, mental support. Palestine? So one of the important features of this verse is that we still get time in the valley. But we're in the valley, we're not alone. That He walks with us through the valley. He will be there to support us and protect us in our self-care, protect us in providing those things that might be able to help us. Certainly the person who listens and hears our prayers. Now, on the exodus from Egypt, were there any dark valleys? Yeah?
And it can be a self-made dark valley because it can be decisions that you make that are wrong, and God leads you back to the right path.
Building the golden calf was a dark valley.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and they did it. They acknowledged this is what we should do. But at that point, they were new. They were really new to this God that Moses brought to them. Now, they didn't have, when they were slaves, they didn't have a Sabbath. They worked every day. They were used to every day, over and over, just doing the same thing. But when they got into the wilderness, they rested. They had a Sabbath. And in that case, before they knew God and before they were drawn to God, they had time to rest and to think up bad things. I mean, let's face it. Yes. So that contrast, that idle mind kind of thing where, you can really mess yourself up, contrasts with the Sabbath. They had a day off work, but that doesn't mean that they were using it to honor God, because they didn't really know God. It took them 40 years, and then they were learning, you know. But what is it you do with your time off? So that's a problem as well. If we are given this time off, how we use it is important. So we are up to verse 5.
You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup runneth over.
You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings.
You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows.
You set a table for me, right in front of my enemies. You lay my head in oil. My cup is so full that it spills over.
We'll survive. Okay. In the presence of your enemies, how does God deal with you? He provides for you. You have a feast. Comfort, blessings, a feast in the presence of your enemies. Now, what does that mean? How can we relate that to something else?
It seems to me that the enemies might be out here, but they look at you and you're prosperous. You're doing really well. And that creates jealousy in them. And
So, if you prosper when your enemies are not, it does create jealousy, yes. Mm-hmm. Is that part of what it's saying here?
I think that it just says that God provides for you, and your enemies have to look at this and be dismayed or, wonder if their gods are working or whatever.
So he does provide for you, and your enemies may be dismayed, or if you think about Baal and you remember the altar that was covered with water and the altar that was not, and the sacrifice was water laden, and still God consumed that sacrifice, and Baal never consumed the others. So even in the presence of your enemies, God provides. Pretty good deal. Yeah. Yes.
While we were reading this, it just seemed like there were great pains taken by these other versions of the scripture to explain what still waters are or what green pastures were. But when it comes to oil on the head, there's no real definition of why they did that. What was that?
Oil on the head is simply if you were a stranger coming into someone's tent, they gave you oil for your head because it was sunburned and hot from your travels. And so it was a cooling and a soothing practice to be able to offer comfort to somebody. Well, might have. And we have one more verse, right? Okay.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
So what that does is it's the final blessing and assurance, isn't it? You here you are making the choice to be faithful. God has done all of these things. David has testified to the way in which he has been led in blessings and lushness and richness his whole life. And now in this final verse, he's saying, I will remain faithful. And so it's a commitment statement from David in this psalm. It's a commitment statement that the Lord's goodness is there and that he's going to stay faithful. Now, another thing you can notice in the 23rd Psalm is the first 4 verses talks about the Lord and God out there. But the last 2 verses, the pronouns change. The pronouns in the last 2 verses is that he's talking with God. It becomes you, not he. It becomes you, my God. And you and I. And so that's an indication of his change in his thought process as well. That it's changing from this is my paradise to I thank you, God, and I will remain faithful. So, is this a Sabbath? Is it Sabbath? Is this paradise? Is this someplace you can take yourself? Can you take yourself? Can you hold yourself in the green pastures and the still waters? You can, because you know that God is there and God is providing. And it sets a reference frame for your mind. We can dwell in there. So when the Exodus, they were in the wilderness and every 7 days they rested, what did they do? What do you think they did that allowed them to become closer in personalizing the 23rd Psalm? When you work every day, you don't have time for education. Where do you think the young people, and some of the old as well, learned about the scriptures? On the 7th day. If you work every day, you don't have time to worship. When did they worship? There was that time set apart for their Sabbath. If you work every day, you don't have time to pay attention to your friend relationships. When did that happen? When did they have time to share a meal together? Prepare and share a meal. When did they have time to catch up on problems at home? Whatever they might be. So even though they were forbidden to work, it freed their time for those things that helped them grow spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. So they had to learn about the practices of the Sabbath in order to grow into a relationship with God. They needed time to do that. Do you agree it takes time to do your devotions, to study, to keep your relationships strong, to witness, to volunteer, to make the choices that God would have you make, and the time to exercise them? It's a different way to look at the 23rd Psalm, isn't it? A different way to look at Sabbath. Why the 23rd Psalm represents Sabbath. It represents that rest, that renewal, and that closer relationship. Would you kindly turn to page 116. I would like to read this last paragraph to you. As people of faith, we are not exempt from that walk, but in the midst of it, family can also lay claim to its promises. They were in the house of the Lord, where they had an abundance of love in the midst of scarcity of their loved one's presence. They were finding rest in the living water, and they did not need to fear because they could stand on the promise that the story in here about a sick young man and his life, that he was dwelling in the house of the Lord. That is Sabbath, my friends. That is what it means to be at rest. When you do not have fear, you are in the house of the Lord, and you have an abundance of love, even as you're in the valley of the shadow of death. Let's read the sentence prayer together. Lord, let me find